Welcome. My name is Amy Accardo, and I'd like to welcome you to our introduction of the topic Autism and Neurodiversity. You may be a teacher, a parent, or a professional interested in learning more about autism and neurodiversity. In this brief introduction, we cover topics ranging from basic language use and definitions to disability models and to developing support systems through universal design. More specifically, we will begin with the question, what is neurodiversity? And we'll explore the basics of language use and definitions, social justice and the neurodiversity movement, models of disability, neurodiversity, a strength perspective, neurodiversity, accommodations and supports, executive functioning, and universal design for learning, also known as UDL. So what is neurodiversity? Let's start with what neurodiversity is not. Neurodiversity is not a theory or a way of thinking, it's a fact. For basics, neurodiversity refers to the diversity of human brains and to recognizing brain differences as a natural human variation. We use the term neurodiversity in line with other forms of diversity. For example, we recognize the neurodiversity of our student population. Neurodiversity encompasses individuals who identify as on the autism spectrum, and we will place special emphasis on autism throughout our sessions. And neurodiversity also encompasses individuals who are labeled with other diagnoses such as attention deficit disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, those who have a hearing, vision, or medical health conditions such as anxiety. Neurodiversity is not exclusionary, and it includes individuals with a vast range of differences. In other words, anyone with a natural brain variation. Neurodiversity is a concept where neurological differences are to be recognized and, most importantly, respected as any other human variation. How we use language is important. In our related full webinar, we will cover in greater detail the terms and language indicated here. But let's start with the terms neurodiverse and neurodivergent. The terms neurodiverse and neurodivergent are not interchangeable and are often used incorrectly. Neurodiverse refers to a group in which members have a variety of brain differences. Groups are neurodiverse. For example, we have a neurodiverse student population at Rowan University. One person, however, cannot be neurodiverse. Neurodivergent refers to a person with a brain that functions differently from what's considered the societal standard. So individuals are neurodivergent. For example, the neurodivergent student excels in creative thinking. In the full webinar, we will get into additional terms, including ableism, disableism, neurotypical. We will also consider when both person first and when identity first language are appropriate, and we'll consider the ever-changing preferred terminology for autism. So what is the neurodiversity movement? The neurodiversity movement began with the autism rights movement, and the term neurodiversity was coined by autistic self-advocate Judy Singer in the late 1990s. The neurodiversity movement is not something new. According to autistic self-advocate Nick Walker, the neurodiversity movement is a social justice movement that seeks civil rights, equality, respect, and full societal inclusion for the neurodivergent. The movement is based on a philosophy embracing different ways of thinking and behaving as normal variations of being human. Nick Walker's blog is one that is highly recommended. You can see the link on the slide here, or search neurocosmopolitanism. So rooted in the social model of disability, the neurodiversity movement applies the same idea of removing socially constructed barriers that disable people with physical impairments, such as STEPS, to those with brain differences. And we'll dive deeper into socially constructed barriers and models of disability in the next few slides, and also in greater detail in the related Autism and Neurodiversity webinar. Now let's consider two historic models of disability, the medical model and the social model. The medical model of disability stems from the medical field. Individuals with a disability are given a label, and that label is what allows them to access services and treatments. The medical model views disability as a deficit with a person's body or mind. And the focus of this model is usually treating or curing the deficit in an effort to remove it, so the individual is typical or normal. In contrast, the social model of disability shifts the focus from disability as a deficit to disability as socially constructed. The social model separates impairment, for example, a person's functional limitations, from disability, the barriers imposed on a person. The social model recognizes that societal barriers turn impairments into disabilities. I want to go back to the second bullet point here as it's important. The social model does not exclude education, accommodations, and supports. This is an important distinction. The distinction is separating the impairment from the disability. Neurodiversity is rooted in this social model of disability. Consideration of each model helps situate self-reflection of how individuals who are neurodivergent are perceived. This includes how individuals are perceived in inclusive settings, including the community and in school. The models also reinforce the importance of taking on a strengths-based perspective to disability. Our most important takeaway here is that through the social model of disability, we recognize that societal barriers can turn impairments into disabilities. In other words, it's often the policies or the systems and procedures in place that disable the individual. Let me give you an example. So for example, a teenager that identifies as ADHD, who learns best through hands-on activities, is not disabled in an active science lab environment and in the classroom and is highly successful. But the same student may be disabled when placed in a lecture hall where the norm is to sit still and listen and only take auditory notes for 90 minutes. So also spotlighting autism, until recently, autism has been considered a medical disorder, such as cancer needing to be cured. This medical model of autism has at the goal reduction of the symptoms of autism so that individuals on the autism spectrum can act more like non-autistic individuals, or in other words, become normal. In order to reach this goal, investigators search for the causes of autism so they can develop potential treatments to fix the symptoms. Individuals who employ the medical model of disability perceive individuals with disabilities, often inadvertently from a deficit mindset, because their focus is on a cure. We'll continue unpacking this content in the full webinar and think more about shifting that mindset to social models of disability. At this point, I ask that you stop and think. Consider the cartoon. The wheelchair user is unable to enter the building. A voice influenced by the medical model of disability states, "Her impairment is the problem. They should cure her or give her prosthetics." A voice influenced by the social model of disability states, "The stairs are the problem. They should build a ramp." So looking to the blue section of the slide on the left, moving from physical differences to brain differences, can you think of an example of how you or a neurodivergent friend, family member, or student has been treated differently based on medical and social models of thinking? I look forward to a discussion of your experiences and what this brings to mind during our full webinar. Let's now consider the many strengths that come with neurodiversity. The image on this slide highlights some of the many strengths often connected to various disability labels. For example, individuals on the autism spectrum often excel in fine detail processing, in concentration, in memory tasks, and are often honest and direct to the point. Individuals with ADHD are often known to be highly creative, to be innovative, to be energetic. And really overall, those who are neurodivergent are found to be resilient, innovative thinkers. For these reasons and many more, employers are increasingly seeking the talent of neurodivergent employees in the workplace. We will dive deeper again into strengths and specific employment initiatives in the full webinar. Just as neurodivergent individuals have patterns of strengths, they also have patterns of impairments benefiting from support. So specific to autism, individuals often benefit from support with social communication, including reading nonverbal communication and understanding figurative language. This may impact a reading comprehension, for example, and also written language. And in our full webinar, we'll dive into and explore some of the effective practices in the research literature for teaching reading comprehension and writing to autistic students. That's something of great interest to me. Also, social, emotional, and mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression are frequently reported by neurodivergent individuals and by neurodivergent students. And finally, we'll think about impairments in executive functioning skills. I use that word impairment here. This is something that really warrants support systems, accommodations, and services. Executive functioning skills are something that we can work on, and we hear very frequently from our students that that is an area that they perceive as a need. Continuing with executive functioning skills are cognitive processes that help us control our own goal-directed behaviors. For example, some of these skills are task initiation, organization, flexibility, maintaining focus, self-monitoring, working memory, managing emotions, impulse control. Recognizing that we are neurodivergent kids, students, all may have impairments in executive functioning is essential to establishing instructional supports, to considering next steps in supporting development of executive functioning. And the great news is executive functioning skills do improve with practice. So in our full webinar, we'll dig deeper into specific supports, some of which would be use of schedules, use of graphic organizers, and implementing and using technology. So at this point, we've considered what neurodiversity is. We've considered language use and definitions, a brief history of what social justice and the neurodiversity movement brings, models of disability, strengths and impairments of neurodivergent individuals. So you're probably starting to consider, how can we support the brain differences of neurodivergent thinkers from a strength perspective, and also support them in inclusive settings. So the framework we spotlight is Universal Design for Learning, also known as UDL. UDL is a framework for teaching and learning grounded in neuroscience and a commitment to reducing barriers for all students to succeed. Through a set of guiding principles, UDL supports development of flexible pedagogical practices that begin with the expectation of neurodiversity. You can learn more about UDL prior to our webinar by looking up Meyer, Rose, and Gordon, and they have multiple books, resources online. You can also look up CAST, C-A-S-T, and find more about UDL. At the basic level, UDL focuses on providing multiple means of engagement, as you see on the left side of the screen here. Examples of providing multiple means of engagement would be using technology and hands-on tasks. UDL also focuses on providing multiple means of representation. For example, pairing verbal instruction with consistent visual supports. UDL focuses on providing multiple means of action and expression. For example, Expression can be through not only writing, but also through text, such as text messages, through blogs, through dance, also through artwork, through multimedia presentations. Really, it's endless. So in our full webinar, we plan to explore implementing UDL in inclusive settings with a focus on providing options and choices of product, of process, of content in learning settings for educational participants of the webinar. And we also will further consider how we can universally design spaces from the home to the preschool to 12th grade classroom to the college campus. It's really essential that we provide inclusive spaces designed with the expectation of neurodiversity, including neurodiversity, from the onset. We hope you've enjoyed this introduction to autism and neurodiversity. In our full webinar, we will dig deeper into the topics introduced here, including language use, social justice and the neurodiversity movement, models of disability, executive functioning, universal design, and considering neurodiversity using a strength perspective. And we'll also provide related resources and consider the topic of neurodiversity across the lifespan, from companies hiring neurodivergent employees for their strengths, to colleges starting neurodiversity centers, to parent advocates, self-advocates, all working to shift from a focus on disability to a focus on disability justice. You can visit the LRC-South online at go.rowan.edu/LRC-South.